The ballroom was ready for a celebration. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above tables dressed in silver silk. A towering cake, iced in soft lavender and crowned with delicate sugar butterflies, stood untouched at the center of the room. A violinist tuned her instrument near the stage. I agree. Staff moved quietly, checking their watches, whispering reassurances. But no one was coming. At precisely 4:00 p.m., CEO Adrian Vale stood at the entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel, staring at a row of empty valet spaces reserved for guests who had promised they would attend his daughter's birthday party. His jaw tightened as another message buzzed on his phone. Something came up. So sorry. Urgent travel. Frickle. Let's reschedule. He didn't need to open them to know what they said. Inside the ballroom, 8-year-old Elara Vale sat in her wheelchair near the window, sunlight warming her delicate face. Her dark curls were pinned back with a silver clip, and she wore a pale blue dress that shimmered whenever she moved, though movement, for her, was limited to her hands and the gentle tilt of her head. She couldn't move her legs. She couldn't stand to greet anyone, but she could feel everything. Everything. And she was waiting. Adrian had built one of the largest tech companies in the city from nothing. Vale Innovations employed thousands. His name commanded respect. Investors fought for meetings. Employees straightened when he walked by. Yet today he felt powerless. He had sent personal invitations. So he had called executives, partners, even old friends. He had donated to charities in their names. He had reserved the grandest ballroom money could buy. He had done everything except ask what Elara truly wanted. At 4:20 p.m., the violinist stopped playing. At 4:35, the catering manager approached Adrian cautiously. Sir, should we begin serving? Not yet, Adrian replied quietly, though his voice carried steel. They'll come, but they didn't. Across the city, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment above a grocery store, Daniel Reyes was arguing gently with his 6-year-old son, Mateo. You sure you want to go? Daniel asked, adjusting the collar of Mateo's only dress shirt. Mateo nodded enthusiastically. You said she doesn't have many friends. Daniel hesitated. Earlier that week, Mateo had come home with a crumpled gold invitation he'd found taped awkwardly to his backpack. It had been addressed to a Families of Bright Futures Therapy Center. Elara attended physical therapy there twice a week. Daniel remembered seeing her once. Small, quiet, her father always in a tailored suit, speaking into a phone even while pushing her wheelchair. Dad, Mateo insisted. Birthdays are sad if nobody comes. Daniel swallowed. He knew something about empty chairs. Since his wife Sophia had passed away 3 years ago, life had been a tightrope of bills, double shifts, and whispered goodnights. He worked as a delivery driver, sometimes skipping meals so Mateo wouldn't have to. He looked at the address on the invitation again. The Grand Meridian Hotel. It wasn't a place men like Daniel walked into. Still, he grabbed his worn blazer. Okay, he said softly. Let's go. Back in the ballroom, Elara's fingers traced invisible shapes on her lap. She tried to keep smiling whenever staff looked her way. Daddy, she called gently. Adrian rushed to her side instantly. Yes, princess. Maybe they're stuck in traffic. He forced a smile. Of course. Big city. She nodded, but her eyes dimmed slightly. At 4:57 p.m., the doors opened. Every head turned. Daniel stood awkwardly at the threshold, holding Mateo's hand. His blazer was slightly too large. His shoes were clean but worn. Mateo clutched a small gift-wrap box covered in superhero paper. The room felt enormous around them. Adrian's first instinct was irritation. Another reporter? A mistake? Then he saw Mateo's shy wave toward Elara. Elara. Daniel cleared his throat. Hi, we got the invitation from Bright Futures. My son wanted to know if we could join. The silence stretched. Elara's face lit up brighter than the chandeliers. Yes, she exclaimed. Adrian stared at the man in front of him. He wasn't a partner, not an executive, not someone who could offer strategic alliances or social capital. Just a father and a boy. Something inside Adrian shifted. Of course, he said finally. Please, welcome. Mateo walked straight to Elara without hesitation. Hi, Mateo. I brought you something, but you have to promise not to laugh. Elara giggled. Okay, he handed her the box. Inside was a handmade bracelet made of colorful string and tiny plastic stars. You made it myself, Mateo said proudly. Elara's fingers trembled as she held it. It's perfect. For the first time that day, Adrian felt the knot in his chest loosen. The party began again, but differently. The violinist resumed playing softer now. Daniel and Adrian stood near the cake table, an invisible wall of social difference between them. You didn't have to come, Adrian said quietly. Daniel shrugged. My son thought she shouldn't be alone. Adrian exhaled slowly. Neither should any child. Over the next hour, something remarkable happened. Mateo asked Elara about her favorite movies. He described his dream of building rockets. He positioned himself at her eye level, never once glancing at her wheelchair with pity. When it was time for games, Mateo insisted they adapt them. We can play sitting down, he declared confidently. Staff rearranged activities. Laughter echoed where silence had threatened to settle. At 5:40 p.m., as Elara prepared to blow out her candles, she looked around the vast room. It wasn't full, but it wasn't empty. I'll make a wish, Mateo whispered. Whispered. Elara closed her eyes. Across the room, Adrian's phone buzzed again, another apology message from a board member. He silenced it without reading. For years, Adrian had believed influence equaled importance, that prestige created belonging. But watching Daniel kneel beside his daughter, helping adjust the bracelet on her wrist, he realized something painful. He had invited the world. But the world had never truly known Elara. After cake, Daniel prepared to leave, not wanting to overstay. Thank you for letting us join, he said sincerely. Adrian hesitated. Pride had always been his armor. Vulnerability felt foreign. Would you stay a little longer? He asked. He hasn't laughed like this in a while. Daniel nodded. As evening settled, Adrian learned things he hadn't expected. Daniel worked nights to make rent. Mateo struggled with reading but loved science. They couldn't afford after-school programs, and yet they radiated warmth. Meanwhile, Adrian confessed something he hadn't told anyone. I built an empire, he said quietly, but I don't know how to build friendships for my daughter. Daniel considered this. A maybe, he said gently. You don't build them. Maybe you show up for them. The following weeks changed everything. Mateo and Elara began meeting regularly at therapy. Adrian rearranged his schedule to attend. Daniel helped Elara design a small robotics kit adapted for her limited hand movement. Adrian funded improvements at Bright Futures, not as a publicity stunt, but anonymously. Word slowly spread, not through press releases, but through genuine connection. Children from the therapy center started visiting. Families felt welcomed, not intimidated. Adrian learned to sit on the floor beside his daughter's wheelchair, to listen without checking his phone, to measure success in smiles instead of stock prices. One afternoon, months later, Elara looked at her father and said, Daddy, can we have my next birthday at the park? The park? He asked. Yes, and invite everyone from therapy. And Mateo and his dad, and no big chandeliers, he laughed. Done. The next birthday was nothing like the first. No crystal ballroom, no corporate guests. Just picnic blankets, homemade cupcakes, children laughing in the sun. Daniel grilled burgers. Adrian wore jeans. Mateo helped Elara release balloons into the sky. As the day ended, Adrian watched his daughter surrounded by friends, not impressed by wealth, but connected by kindness. He finally understood. The most powerful thing he could give his child wasn't influence. It was presence. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one father brave enough to say, Can we join you? Because when the world stays silent, a single act of compassion can echo louder than any crowd. And no child should ever blow out candles alone.